For Poland Daily News, I'm Phil Goss. We start tonight with historical politics and a scandal in the German parliament with the participation of the leader of the right-wing populist Alternative for Germany party. Alexander Gałland said that the conclusion of the Molotov-Ribbentrop pact by Germany and the USSR in 1939 was the right decision from the point of view of political realism. He also suggested that it was Poland that bears the blame for Hitler's agreement with Stalin. Izabela Krycka looked into the case. The words of the German politician were spoken on Wednesday in the Bundestag during a debate on the 80th anniversary of Germany's attack on the Soviet Union. According to the AfD leader, Stalin had no other option than to reach an agreement with Hitler in 1939. He also suggested that Poland was to blame. A Realpolotik decision right for his own survival, the consequences of which, however, were terrible for Poland. Stalin had to buy a short amount of time in order to better arm himself against the German attack. It is primarily about Nord Stream 2. We are victims of this German-Russian agreement on the gas pipeline because the construction will be completed and then Central and Eastern Europe will be threatened by Russian dictates. It is also an attempt to discredit Polish demands for World War II reparations. Well, if we are guilty of World War II, so why demand compensation? The Embassy of the Republic of Poland in Berlin and the German ambassador to Poland responded to the politician's words. No one should question historical facts. In the case of the Molotov-Ribbentrop pact, the aggressors were Germany and the Soviet Union. Poland was the victim of this perfidious agreement, a partition plan that brought immeasurable suffering to our neighbor, the Polish nation. The German elite are pursuing a hegemonic policy in Europe. They have the most to say in the EU, and it is very inconvenient for them that it is still viable to associate contemporary German policy with such past events as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact or Hitler's policy. The Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact was concluded on August 23, 1939. It was presented as a non-aggression treaty between the Third Reich and the Soviet Union. It contained a secret protocol on the division of the territories of Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Finland, and Romania. This pact is referred to as the plan of the fourth partition of Poland. If in August 1939 Hitler had no guarantee from Stalin to strike Poland, stab us in the back, then Hitler probably would not have attacked Poland on September 1, 1939. The implementation of the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact began on September 17, 1939, when the Red Army entered Poland. Soviet aggression included the Katyn massacre and 4 waves of deportations of Poles to Siberia. Soviets deported an estimated 800,000 to 1 million Poles. Israel is preparing for a new government today and an end to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's record 12-year hold on power only hours before Parliament was expected to vote on a new government, ushering in an administration that is pledged to heal a nation bitterly divided over his departure. Netanyahu, 71, the most dominant Israeli politician of his generation, had failed to form a government after a March 23rd election, the 4th in 2 years. The new cabinet, which will be sworn in after a Knesset confidence vote it is expected to win, was cobbled together by the centrist opposition leader Yair Lapid and ultranationalist Naftali Bennett. Bennett, a hawkish high-tech millionaire and an Orthodox Jew, tweeted a photograph of himself at prayer, captioned with a biblical blessing. He will serve as premier for 2 years before Lapid, a former TV host, takes over.
What I really think is that it's just a day-to-day. It's not a legitimate government. It's very pretty sad that 80 seats, almost 80 seats in the parliament, the Knesset, belongs to the right wing, and they sold their soul and their ideology and their beliefs to the extreme left wing, just in one purpose: the hatred to Netanyahu and to become a prime minister by stealing the votes. They did not vote for him to make a coalition with the left wing. And what's going to be? Who knows?
Basically, it's complicated because I think on one hand Netanyahu is very experienced and new Prime Minister Bennett will have to learn and maybe will have to suffer because of that, because he lacked the experience. On the second hand, I think too much power for too long is bad. And I think Netanyahu got corrupted, and it's the right time for a new government and a new leader.
They will head a government comprised of parties from across the political spectrum, including, for the first time, one that represents Israel's 21% Arab minority. They plan largely to avoid sweeping moves on hot-button international issues such as policy toward the Palestinians, and to focus on domestic reforms. With little to no prospect of progress toward resolving the decades-long conflict with Israel, many Palestinians will be unmoved by the change of administration, saying Bennett will likely pursue the same right-wing agenda as Netanyahu. Now for the European Football Championship, Polish footballers are on their way from Gdansk to St. Petersburg, where they will play their first match against Slovakia tomorrow. However, the entire sports world is commenting on the dramatic events of the Denmark-Finland match, during which Christian Eriksen collapsed and lost consciousness. A medical team gave the player CPR on the pitch Saturday, with soccer officials later saying that Eriksen was stable and awake in the hospital. Denmark midfielder Christian Eriksen was conscious in a hospital Saturday, according to officials, after the 29-year-old collapsed during his side's Euro 2020 opening match with Finland. It happened suddenly in the 42nd minute of the match. A hush fell over the crowd. His teammates gathered around him, and one of them appeared to stick his fingers in Eriksen's mouth to clear his airway. Then he was given CPR on the pitch by medics. People gathered outside bars in central Copenhagen, many in tears, during the period when Eriksen's condition remained unclear. Finnish fans, too, were shocked by the news. The scoreless game was stopped for 1 hour and 45 minutes while Eriksen's condition was unknown. In the end, Finland claimed a shock 1-0 victory over Denmark. Professor Vitold Kejun's life was full of achievements. He was a lecturer, advisor to many governments, and a UN expert, but he will be remembered forever as the smiling lieutenant of the Polish army. During the Warsaw Uprising, he pulled a machine gun on the enemy, a gun that weighed several dozen kilograms with one arm. Kejun died yesterday, June 12th, at the age of 99. Born in 1922, he belonged to the first generation in 123 years of Poles born in a free country. Dreams of their future were put on hold with the Second World War. Vitold Kejun, as other young people, had to work to make a living. He studied at Polish underground universities forbidden by the Germans, and, at the same time, served in the underground army, the Armia Krajowa. In 1944, during the Warsaw Uprising, he fought as Lieutenant Wypad, or assault, in a special forces unit. On August 23rd, during the attack on the main post office, he took 14 Germans prisoner, confiscating their weapons and ammunition. He was then photographed. Many years later, the Warsaw Uprising Museum used this symbolic picture to remember the sacrifice of the heroes. 8 years ago, Professor Kejun spoke about it on Republika television. I am the last member of my squad. All my friends are dead, but years ago, when we were still meeting, we agreed that it was one of the glorious times of our lives. The point is that today it is difficult to understand what the occupation was. Fight for freedom, satisfaction from collective effort. It was such a deep experience that we will remember it for the rest of our lives. The war destroyed our youth. I was 17 when it started and 22 years old by the end. We had a curfew. Everything was closed. The news came about friends and relatives arrested and killed by Germans. One went out into the street and could not be sure if he would come home alive. For example, you rode a tram. Suddenly, you saw people running away. If you managed to get away and run, then it was good. If the Germans caught you, then they might shoot you right on the street. Professor Kejun will be remembered as a hero and someone who set an incredible example for generations to come. For Poland Daily News, I'm Phil Goss. Good night.